I'm not sure how they're going to do it, and I'm not sure what the hook is going to be.
And that's a big
So,
one, right? How do you differentiate yourself from, oh, we're outside of just saying we're not them, right? Because
right,
that's what they've been going on for years is, oh, well, at least we're not them. We're
right,
different because we have a but you still don't promote and relegate. So what are you really other than MLS light, right?
right. So then, are you going to have promotion or relegation? I told you I had a hot take. I don't care if we ever have Pro Rel in this country. I really don't. I don't see the advantage. I don't see how it's feasible to a business person. Right before we got on the call, I looked this up. I think that there was a time when we could have had Pro Rel.
Mhm.
And I would love to catch Don Garber somewhere for, honestly, probably I would kidnap him, put him in a room, tape him to a chair, talk to him as long as he was willing to talk to me before I had to start electroshocking him. But I would love to just have 20 minutes and be like, hey, man, back when you took over, did you ever think about this? Was it ever
Right.
something that you thought was possible? So in 2002, Miami and Tampa Bay were axed. MLS went down to 10 teams. Most of them were owned by Philip Anschultz, Lamar Hunt, and then Robert Kraft had the revolution, which, always makes me happy at the end of a story. Happy at the ends, Robert Kraft. Okay. In 2005, sorry, I'm not sorry. In 2005, the league started to expand. Chivas USA and RSL came in for expansion fees of 7.5 million. Okay.
I didn't
The
know that was
league
the
is
number.
starting
That's
to grow.
insane.
7.5 million. I thought it was lower than that. In '07, Toronto joined for 10 million. And then 8 years went by before we had expansion. And that was when I was really falling in love with MLS
Mhm.
because in 1996, 1997, I think I tried out for the Metro Stars in 96 and they said, no, thank you. Big mistake. I'd
Yeah.
like to say again, they never won a cup. I'm not saying that it was because they went with Tony Evil over me, but other people have said that. And if you think my mom is crazy, then we have to go outside. At that time, and I know we're going to be talking about salaries later, I'll tell you that I think the thing that made the goalkeeper coach realize he was talking to more of a netter than he realized was when he said, your pay for this backup job would be $13,400 a year. And I was like, awesome. That's great. Just, you okay? Are you in there? So the new team started coming in. I was, honestly, MLS back then was very difficult to watch. For someone who grew up watching Liverpool, who watched a ton of international soccer, it wasn't very high quality. Okay, taking nothing away from some of the amazing players who played. Overall, it wasn't the most pleasing to the eye. Then I was out of the country for a while. I was down in the islands. I was, out being a scuba instructor and living on boats. I came back to the mainland in '04 and started watching right before RSL came in. So they come in at 7.5 million. Toronto comes in at 10. And from '07 to 2015, no new teams. When Toronto and NYC came in, or when New York City came in 15, it was for 100 million. Orlando paid 70. 5 years later, Miami and Nashville paid 150 million. Talking about. I'm not going to talk about 2021 because I don't consider Austin an expansion team. 2022, Charlotte paid 325. So in 2 years, the fee went from 150 million to 325 million. And now, in the year of our Lord 2025, San Diego just paid $500 million to come into the league. Are you telling me that San Diego would be willing to drop down to a second division after paying $500 million to be in the first division? I don't buy it. I don't know how you even broach that conversation with a straight face. These are not local businessmen who own car dealerships and are looking to sponsor their mechanics so that they don't go off on strike. These are billionaires, tycoons of industry. I don't see why. I don't see what advantage. How are you going to go to them with a straight face and say, well, some of the fans are really going to like it though. It will be so romantic. I just don't see it. Now, USL, you're talking about smaller numbers, but you're still talking about significant investment for the people who are making those, who are writing the checks on those smaller numbers. You know, Arthur Blank doesn't own a USL team. And the guys who own USL teams, bless them, they have way more money than me. They're not shopping in Arthur Blank's store either.
No.
Okay. So you're going to tell them, hey, by the way, I know you're barely scraping by now if you're making a profit at all, but there's a chance you get relegated down to a lower division. And by the way, if you have enough bad years in a row, you might be playing basically amateur Sunday league. You might have a 48-year-old goalie who's trying to relive his glory days
Yeah.
facing you.
Yeah, no, it's huge, and again, this always was going to lead to that sort of conversation around Pro Rel, and we have tiptoed around that because it always brings around the wrong types of conversations, in my opinion. I was a part of that. I was a part of that online for a while where I was like poking my head in there and being like, "Hey guys, like you're throwing stats out. Here are some other stats that I think disregard your point," and it's like, nope, those don't actually matter. It's like, well, why don't they
It's got to
matter?
be Pro Rel or it's not serious.
Right. Yeah. It's one of those like, oh, look at all these dead teams. I'm like, well, if you look at the first 30 years of the other, the Premier League, they lost. I think the number in the United States for the first 30 years is something like 200. I think the Premier League or the English system lost like 150 in their first 30 years. Like and again, that's Wikipedia numbers, but anyways, like obviously there are these bad conversations come out of it because it doesn't do anything except create animosity, right? But when you can have, I think, positive conversations, I think that's always nice. But if Pro Rel is not coming, or at least for the near future, which is kind of what they were hinting at, was like, yeah, it's a possibility, but it's a way long ways away because you have to go through the PLS, because you have to go through convincing all the owners, you have to do a lot to get that done. What is the end goal then? If it's not going to be Pro Rel, where does this go? Are we just going to coexist happily as two first divisions?
I want to make one small point
Sure.
just because I still have an athletic subscription. I,
Me
I
too.
let it lapse when Bogart left because honestly, he was 90% of what I read.
Yep.
Not saying that because he is a JSFC alum, although he is. When I read their articles about this, when I talk about this, when I see people, debating it on Twitter, when I talk to my friends, do you realize that they did a vote and they were nowhere close to what they needed from the ownership to get
Mhm.
Pro Rel? Like they thought, hey, we'll make a first division and then everyone's going to want to do Pro Rel. They asked the owners and they were like, no,
Yeah.
absolutely not. So that's just another mountain they have to climb.
Yeah.
Great, figure out how to make a first division league. Then you're going to have to stock it with people who actually are willing to do Pro Rel because right now they don't have that.
Yeah. Well, and
But
that's one of the things. Sorry, before we build onto that, because there's one more I want to say. One of the things that I think always bounces off of that too is like, if you build it, they will come sort of thing. Like, oh, there are millions of people who don't watch MLS because there's no Pro Rel, right? There are millions of people who don't watch USL because they can't get to the first division. It's like if you walked on the street right now and saw a random person wearing a Liverpool jersey and was like, "Where are you from?" And they're like, "Morris Township, New Jersey," right? Hey,
yeah,
if they put a team in USL2 tomorrow and they had a chance to get to MLS, would you stop supporting Liverpool right now and put all of your effort into supporting this Morris Township team for 4 years if they do 4 perfect years so that they can go play in MLS? They'd laugh you off the street. They'd be like, absolutely not, because the draw isn't the climb. The draw is what's the best of the best. And guess what? MLS still doesn't even crack the top three, right? I think you mentioned it. It was League MX, it was Premier League, and there's probably another European team that bounces over us, right? Like that, and that's not because, oh man, look at how beautiful Pro Rel is, and you can watch the Southamptons of the world come up and get 12 points a season. Like that's not what people are watching for. They're watching because the best players in the world play there. So until they come
right.
over here, nobody's going to give up their European team to be a main supporter of this team. Maybe they'll balance it, but when you push comes to shove, the reality is they're not going to give that up for at least decades, right? Unless you are creating another generation like we talked about before. But I wanted to add that in because I remembered it before we stepped on. But yeah, please continue.
So what I would suggest then, if it's not going to be Pro Rel, what they could do, and I haven't seen this mentioned anywhere, why don't you be the guys who switch to a winter schedule, even a Clausura schedule or an Apertura schedule? My
Mm-hmm.
Spanish isn't good enough to know which one you call it when you split the schedule into two,
Yeah, yeah.
the way they do in Russia. Why don't you guys try that? See if you can get some fans who want to watch soccer all year round. Because I've I'm perfectly willing to admit, I mean, it would be tough to deny that I'm an obsessed soccer lunatic. I've got great swaths of my skin covered in ink that would suggest that I am that guy. And if we moved to Colorado Springs, I would be a season ticket holder of the Switchbacks day one and negative day one. I would already have my tickets before I saw my house.
Mhm.
Okay. I would be that guy. Would I love them as much as RSL? Absolutely not. Would I go to every game and then watch RSL when I got home? Absolutely yes. So there are people that love to be at a live game, and I'm one of those guys. I always would rather be watching it live. That's more important to me than the level. But you really hit it on the head there. You got to bring the players in. And just like we talk about Pro Rel, and I just roll my eyes and mentally start thinking about other things. Usually, Bruce Grobbelaar our penalty kick saves from 1984. Yeah, that happens. The thing when they talk about, well, MLS should switch to a winter schedule, why don't you go back 3 days to when Kansas City hosted Miami and watch Messi running around? Did he look like he was having fun? Did he look like he couldn't wait to get to the locker room and get on Instagram and tell all his similarly, as close to his level as there exists, hey, come play. It's really fun here. Now imagine if half your games are like that.
Or even go back to LAFC Colorado, right? LAFC Colorado, not only do the quality suck, because we know what LAFC can do, we know what Colorado can do. They're there for a reason, right? And everybody online like, oh, it's MLS, and oh, quality always sucks. Ha 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 ha. No, but
I was
also
just going
look
to
at
say that Colorado always sucks,
yeah,
as you were.
I will give that pass. Then look at the stands, right? The stands
Right.
are it's 1,000 people in a huge stadium like that. Now, again, we can go down to that conversation a little bit later, but I do still want to kind of figure out like what is this end goal then? Because where does this go? Like, what are we going to do here? If are we just going to like exist? Like, if it's not going to be pro rel, what's next, right? So for me, I'm thinking merger, right? Because I think USL is probably seeing this as a path to Pro Rel to differentiate themselves if they can get people on board. Maybe it's just a path to say we did it and we can change the PLS and make it open for more people, whatever it may be. MLS, on the other hand, is going to see this as competition, right? They are going to see, and what they have done in the past, if you have competition, you crush it, right? I don't think that's terribly like bold to say. I think it's pretty clear kind of what their ideas were. But what I think is interesting to this is that this is kind of like USL's almost response to this MLS crush mode, I think, right? So Phoenix, Las Vegas, Indy, Detroit, Sacramento, these are all like potential MLS areas, right? Like this is stuff they were thinking. Now they're like, hold on a second, territory rights. If we're going to be a D1, you can't do that, right? So maybe this is their way of being like, the rules are on our side, right? So you can't use the rules to your favor anymore. But this is screaming Soccer Wars 3, right? And I think it's going to get uglier before it gets nicer. But I do think at the end of the day, we're going to see merger. USL is going to get enough traction to show MLS and US soccer that there is interest in other markets that are not MLS, right? Not just D2 or D3, but D1 interest, right? But MLS is going to be the one that have the money and the pre-established reach to help raise those locations up. So do we see Pro Rel at the end of this? It depends on two factors. First, how many of these new first division owners in USL are people who are going to come in and just buy their way in, right? And proper investors, not people who are already there that are getting raised up, but people who are coming in and saying your expansion fee is 75 million, I'll pay it and I'm in, right? Because if you've got 9 of 12 people who are like, I paid the expansion fee, I'm not losing my expansion fee in a year because of 2 injuries that ruined my season, and you have to put a vote to it, you're not winning 9 of 12 majority away, right? But the other is if MLS does buy out USL, which I think we're away from it, or a long ways away from it, but there is this alternate reality that I did think of, and I don't know how long it would take, but I do see this one thing where it's like, and this is my bold take of the episode, right? USL gains so much traction so quickly, like everybody keeps saying it will, which again, this is bold, that it actually ends up buying MLS out and takes it under their wing. I don't think it ever happens, but I do see an alternate reality where that's actually something that happens, and I think it's like it's kind of funny to think because you have this preconceived notion of like we were here first. But if everybody's saying like, oh, I'm gonna go, and obviously echo chambers and social media and all that, but if you're out here saying like, yeah, we're gonna start this up and instantly everybody's gonna come around, especially after the World Cup, they're gonna find something to latch on to. Maybe it goes the other way, and Don Garber looks for a quick payday before his retirement.
Well, here's what we got to do then. I know how to make that happen exactly. You start by taxing churches the way that you should in this
Yes,
country.
yes,
And then you tell them, but we're going to give you 2 years and you could buy one of these soccer teams and make all of your, I'll just say, flock become supporters of that team. So now we're just synergistically solving all of these issues because we can play inside your mega church. That'll
yep,
hold 15,000 people and a couple soccer teams. You've got the fans built in because they'd rather do that on a Sunday than watch you play air guitar, I would think. I know all I know about mega churches from watching the Righteous Gemstones. So I'm a little bit, just thinking this through as I go. But
hmm
something we could look at. Short of that, or someone, the next Elon Musk coming through and saying, I'm just going to buy out the entire league, then I wish I could go back in time. If I could change one thing, I would get into an elevator with Don Garber and talk him into really looking at Pro Rel back in 2014 and saying, hey, man, I know all these clubs have been hemorrhaging money for years and years, and they're about to get an infusion when NYC and Orlando put 170 million into the kitty. But that would have been the time
yep.
to institute Pro Rel. As soon as they went past the 100 million mark, I think they were past it. Like it
It's
was never
over.
going to happen with MLS. And I wish that there was a way that there could have been some silver-tongued devil that got MLS and USL together in a room and said, let's figure out how to, instead of going our separate ways,
hmm
we'll be the first division, you'll be the second division. We're not doing Pro Rel, but we can still help each other
Yep.
because, like you said, it's the players, right? You think Miami's going to keep their attendance when Messi leaves? I can't say no because I don't know, David Beckham's, whatever else I would say about him, he's not an idiot.
Right.
Jorge Mas is not a moron. I'm sure they've got a plan, but without that big player, they're going to go right back to where they were attendance wise. So they have
hmm
to get that player. How are you going to get that player? USL can't compete with MLS salary wise,
Right.
right? They just can't. I just looked up one player. So I'm not saying I'm the salary guru for this, but a gentleman named Kobe Henry, who was a
Yeah.
defender I used to watch down in Florida at the IMG and everything. He went to the USL instead of going to an MLS academy. And then he was sold from USL to France for, I think it was around 700K. I don't know that that number was ever reliably reported, but ESPN said it was around 700K. He went over to France, bounced around on loan into the second division, I believe. And right now he's on loan with RSL. Diego Luna went to the USL. RSL bought him for 250K. I think we had to pay another 25K to somebody who had his rights, San Jose. So we paid 275K. We'll eventually sell him for millions, but we're paying him way better than USL can, right? But now let's look at another guy that RSL bought from USL, Fidel Barajas. We brought Fidel Barajas. I don't have the numbers in front of me. It was, a few $100,000. And then we sold him to Chivas for $4 million
In
CLA
6 months.
Oh my goodness. I love the kid. Absolutely love him. But then they found out, he's not ready to play in Liga MX, or they weren't willing to give him the chance. I'll say that because I think the sky's the limit for this kid. And if you were bored enough to go back through my tweet history, just search on my Twitter history for the word Barajas or Fidel. I don't remember how I referred to him. I watched a GA Cup game that had RSL's fifth string goalie in it. And I watched it to watch him. At the end of the tournament, I tweeted Fidel Barajas. If you're not watching this kid, you're missing out. And it
hmm
was when he was 15. Now he's on loan with DC United. So I want that back and forth. I wish we had that with USL or that
hmm
MLS. I'm not a we, I'm not part of MLS. If MLS had, hey, we can't get, Xavier Goza. or, we can't get this 17-year-old who's really promising, but we can't get him the minutes he needs at the MLS level. Instead of sending you to MLS Next Pro, which I don't know how to nicely say it's barely professional soccer sometimes when I watch it.
Mhm.
We want to send you to USL, where you will be playing competitive matches against men who are desperate to keep their jobs so they can feed their kids. You will learn, you will improve more there than you will in MLS Next Pro. I do believe that. And
Yeah.
I wish there was a way for MLS and USL to be friendly enough for that to be the standard instead of the exception.
Yeah, 100%. And what I'll end on here before we move on to our second topic, this feels almost like a Cold War, right? Both leagues are like plotting and planning what the next move is, trying to outdo the other. And, obviously the following question is who blinks first, right? And after you blink, how does the next one react? And then you're obviously going to have this chain reaction of, people trying to stay ahead of each other. What are we going to do to differentiate? What are we going to do to this? And it really, the question that bolsters off all of this is, does this end in a path of mutually beneficial or mutually destructive, right? Where do we see this going? And I genuinely, I feel like I would struggle to see one side win straight up, right? If this goes down and in 15 years, USL is like, can't do it anymore. We're not going to buy out. We're not going to sell out to MLS. We're just going to shut up shop and let them do their thing. The whole narrative is MLS killed an entire league and took it all for themselves and blah, 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 blah. And that's going to hurt your PR side, right? On the flip side of it, if USL is spending so much money that eventually MLS is like, fine, do whatever you want, and they go and try and take over after that without the stadiums, without the infrastructure, without any of the stuff, they set themselves up for failure as well. So I don't see how one side can survive and also win the whole thing, if that makes sense. It's either we're both going to exist here together, maybe in a joint pyramid in 50 years where there's up and downs and whatever, or I almost see it as like mutually assured destruction, which maybe that's just the pure optimist in me, but that's where I'm at.
I think we'll find out after World Cup when
Yeah.
we see what stars are willing to come play in MLS. So I haven't traveled extensively, but I talked to players who have,
Mhm.
right? I talked to players who have played all over the world, and they do say that our infrastructure is better than a lot of places.
Yeah.
The facilities, the training facilities, the gyms, the medical recovery, we are further ahead than we sometimes, I think, give ourselves credit in that regard. I do think that MLS is so far out ahead of USL that USL isn't going to be able to catch up, and that eventually they will be the ones who get, I think they, will give up. And what I saw here in St. Louis firsthand, and I was a St. Louis FC supporter, anytime except when they were playing the Monarchs. I loved watching them play. My wife's got family from here. Like I said, I used to go to all the matches, always had a
Mhm.
great time. When MLS came to St. Louis FC folded. And one of the majority owners of St. Louis FC is one of the minority owners of St. Louis SC, St.
Mhm.
Louis City SC. What an amazingly creative name they came up with. I'm still mad about it. 4 years later. Why couldn't St. Louis FC that I loved, why can't they be St. Louis City too? Which, if you're having trouble following at home, that's the amazingly creative name for St. Louis City's MLS Next Pro team. But they couldn't. MLS just refused. Absolutely not. They're not going to work with that. I think, and there are there are fans in St. Louis who will not go to St. Louis City
Mhm.
Soccer Park or Energizer Park now because of that. And I respect that so much. I go. I go to as many games as I can, as many matches as I can. And most people do.
Yeah.
And but there are still hurt feelings. I will tell you there are still hurt feelings. And that the attendance fell off last year. When the newness wore off, when the results weren't coming in the way they wanted to, the attendance fell off. So the first, 10, 15 matches last year in that park, I used to send Brian Dunseth, I used to send him videos of just recording from the stands, like, you, like, brother, you got to get out here and call a game. I don't care if you have to, duct tape Taylor Twellman to a chair so he can't make it here. You need to get assigned to a match out here. This is unbelievable. 22,000 fans standing, singing for 90 minutes. The entire stadium was a
Yep.
standing section. It was incredible. I don't like that anymore. I'm curious to see what it's like tomorrow. And most of the fans there probably do not know that there used to be St. Louis FC.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, and that's the
it's
different.
guys like me.
Yeah, well, and that's a difficult part of it, right? And I think you hit it on the head when you mentioned there was a time where MLS and USL could have worked together, and
Yes.
they very easily could have and likely should have done so. But unfortunately, I do believe we're past it, and it's time to gear up because the wars are coming, as they say. But
I thought that was my St. Louis FC park
I
hat.
thought
That's
I
what I
thought you
call
were gonna grab it there. Yeah,
but it was a US one. My wife must be wearing my St. Louis one.
gotcha. Well,
It's a
listen,
shame
like,
that they couldn't figure out how to make it work, but
yeah,
it,
yeah,
it
and that's
does
the
lead
thing.
to hilarious things. Like, I went to a practice for RSL a couple years ago, and at the end of the practice, somebody from the front office was like, "Hey man, did you want to talk to any of the guys from the team?" And I was like, "Yeah, man, I'd love to chat with Gomez for a minute." And they bring over Andres Gomez, who they had just broken the bank. He was one of their largest incoming transfer fees before they got
Hmm.
Chicho Arango. And I was like, "Hey, Andres, what's going on? Blah, blah, blah. I want to talk to Tomas Gomez, the third string goalie, because he used to play for St. Louis FC." And I remember going to watch him there. And I want to see if he remembers the Chuma Cabras, which was, one of the fan groups.
Yeah,
And
that's
the
funny.
people from
Yeah,
RSL are just like, "Matty, you are,"
you're crazy.
they're like, "There's only one you, buddy. We
Yeah,
should have asked the first name."
that I can agree with. There is only one Matty Casey. That is facts.